Whoa, I'm live. All right. It's so cool. What is it, doggo? Come on. Just go lay under the bed like I know you want to. Molly. All right. So basically, this is nothing special. I am here because I want to just get some reading done. I have a really, really hard time forcing myself to read. And when I pretend like when I'm slip. When I'm talking to somebody, it feels a lot easier. So I figure, what would make it really easy to get it done is if I was talking to somebody. But there's nobody here to talk to, and no one, at least no one who'd like to listen to me read this. So what did I do? I decided to put on a live stream. We'll see how it goes. All right. I'm just going to read this piece, and that's it. I honestly don't expect anyone to watch this. I don't expect it to get any views, really. So whatever. It's kind of just, so I'm really just kind of pretending that I'm talking to someone so that I can get it done. I keep staring at the camera because I think I look gorgeous. So let's do it. Gramsci, a brilliant intellectual and founder of the Italian Communist Party, and Trotsky, towering example of revolutionary leadership in theory and in practice, had good reason to write the words cited above. Trotsky, exiled by the Stalinist bureaucracy, was urging a policy of united front on the Communist Party of Germany as the only defense against the danger of Nazism. Gramsci, after the defeat of the Workers' Council's movement in Italy, in which he himself was so prominent, found himself in Mussolini's jail. Eventually, Trotsky met his death 20 years ago at the hand of Stalin's agents. Gramsci's health was destroyed in prison, and he died a young man a few days after its release in 1937. How tragic. Neither of these two men, the most original Marxist thinkers since Lenin, is regarded with favor by the original communist movement, despite Khrushchev's admission that the trials of the 1930s were based on confessions extracted by torture. The slanders about Trotsky's plot against the USSR, his alliance with Hitler, and so on, are allowed to remain as part of the total censorship of his work that exists in the communist parties. In 1957, a small selection of Gramsci's writings was published by Lawrence and Wishart. However, The Modern Prince, longest essay in this selection, was quite heavily cut, and precious little space was devoted to Gramsci's major contributions on workers' councils. One appreciates the great effort made by Dr. Louis Marx, the translator, to bring about this much of Gramsci to English readers. At the same time, it must be said that the cuts in The Modern Prince are unacknowledged, and that several of the omitted sections, dealing with Rosa Luxemburg and Caesarism, etc., would have posed awkward questions for Stalinists. Good, no one's watching. Let's see here. It's not that I care that anyone's watching for putting the fan on. I'm just happy no one's watching, And this is still actually just me, just private. And someone wants to watch this later, then I guess they're strange weirdo, aren't they? Oh, it's gonna make my eyes dry. I need to put it's too much. You might be wondering if she's hot and she's putting the fan on, why is she wearing a sweater? I love this sweater right now. It's really cute. So I keep it on. All right. It is characteristic, Stalinism and historical materialism. It is characteristic that these two men should have laid great stress on the role of human consciousness and of revolutionary leadership. Stalinism can no more entertain such an emphasis than can social democracy. Reformism and opportunism are tied to the existing power structure. A confused mixture of notions of fair play and expediency is the nearest they ever get to theory. Their political actions are based on an adjustment of the partial and temporary interests of selections of the working class to the existing economy and state power. This is why opportunists abhor theory, for theory insists on an understanding of each problem in terms of the all around development of society, focused in our epoch on the working class struggle for state power. Nor are Stalinists better in any better position. In the communist movement, Marxist doctrine has hardened into an ideology. That is to say, particular phrases are taken from Marx and Lenin and used to justify the particular course taken by the Soviet bureaucracy. The authority naturally accruing to the Russian communists after the October Revolution facilitated the spread of the degeneration of the Russian to the other parties in the Communist International. These parties were shaken up, their leaderships changed, their structure arbitrarily fixed under the name of Bolshevism, of course, until they were transmission belts for the international policies of Stalin's bureaucracy rather than revolutionary parties of the working class. In latter years, despite the exposure of Stalin by Khrushchev, the political consequences of this relationship have even deepened, though, of course, they will inevitably produce a reaction inside the foreign parties, and eventually in the Soviet Party. Peaceful competition between the Soviet and the US economies is now clearly stated to be the major form of the conflict between imperialism and socialism. For this to go on, peaceful relations in the rest of the world must be preserved, and so the communist parties take the lead in the fight for peace. As a part of this process, certain theoretical distortions of Marxism play an important role. Above all, Marxism is twisted into an economic determinism. The dialectic is abstracted from history and reimposed on social development as a series of fixed stages. Instead of the rich variety and conflict of human history, we have the natural series of slavery, feudalism, capitalism, and socialism through which all societies pass. The USSR's present structure is thus sanctified as an inevitable successor of capitalism, and any criticisms of its social and political structure must be regarded as secondary. An apparent touch of flexibility is given to the schematic picture of the doctrine that different countries will find their own road to socialism, learning from the USSR, but adapting to their particular national characteristics. This is, of course, a mechanical caricature of historical materialism. The connection between the struggles of the working class for socialism in, say, Britain, Russia, and Vietnam is not at all in the greater or lesser degree of similarity of social structure of those countries, but in the organic interdependence of their struggles. Capitalism is an international phenomenon, and the working class is an international force. The USSR is result of the first breakthrough of the world revolution, a result distorted by Russia's particular economic development before and after the October Revolution, and by the impact of imperialism and the fate of the working class movement since then. And Trotsky laid a firm basis for the study of the relation between the Soviet worker state and the world working class in his writings between 1928 and socialism, when socialism in one country was first theoretically presented, and his death in 1940. There are many socialists who are naturally repelled by the bureaucratic distortions of Soviet society and of the Stalinist parties, as well as by the shameful record of social democracy, and fail to escape from the distorted theory and method of Stalinism. Retaining that fundamental characteristic of Stalinism, loss of confidence in the ability of the working class of advanced capitalist countries to conquer power, they dress up this loss of nerve with theoretical ideas, which have been current in the anti-Bolshevik sections of the left since the October Revolution and even before. Elsewhere in this, Brian Pierce takes certain historical questions bound up with the periodic discovery that the USSR is a capitalist state, a discovery which, of course, leads away from certain uncomfortable political duties, such as the defense of the USSR against imperialism. In this article, I want to take up another argument closely bound with these same ideas, that the root of the trouble lies in Leninist concept of leadership of the working class by a centralized party and Lenin's party of a new type. No idea what party of a new type means. I'm sure that it will be explained, or at least I'm hoping it will be. That's the sound of a scratch and an itch. Let's see here. Whoa, see, I'm making progress. This is way better than when I was trying to just, lay down in the bed and read this. It is hot, though. What did I do? I turned it off. Oh, my God. There we go. There we are. Back on track. Everything is going exactly according to plan. Or so it seems. Let's see here. I should get some water. This is going to be a long, I'm guessing, like hour or so. All right, let's do this. That's not nice. You shouldn't do that to your audience. Make the coughing sound. Oh, well. Let's see. The role of consciousness in history. So that sounds fun. I'm thinking I'm going to like this section. We'll see. Although this argument takes various forms, Lenin's type of party. Oh, they're explaining Lenin's type of party right now. What do you know? Although this argument takes various forms, Lenin's type of party was suited to autocratic Russia, but not to democratic Britain. Leadership will emerge naturally from the working class. All organizations develop bureaucracy. Hold on. It's all right for various forms. Lenin's type of party was suited to autocratic. Molly, when did you appear there? Oh my God. Look at your tongue. We have this dog and her tongue sticks out. And it's so cute. Go on, Molly, be free. All right. Although this argument takes various forms, Lenin's type of party was suited to autocratic Russia, but not to democratic Britain. Leadership will emerge naturally from the working class. All organizations develop bureaucracy. The success, 1917, was a historical accident taken advantage of by a brilliant Bolshevik elite. Oh, okay, hold on. Although this argument takes many various forms, Lenin's type of party was suited to autocratic Russia, but not democratic Britain. Leadership will emerge naturally from the working class. All organizations develop bureaucracy. The success of 1917 was a historical accident taken advantage of by brilliant Bolshevik elite. Rosa Luxemburg and Trotsky predicated the degeneration of the party, etc., etc. It is always underpinned by a false conception of the role of theory and consciousness in history, a tendency towards economic determinism, a notion that the laws of social development are something natural, standing above men and deciding their destinies. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to show you my mouth. That was inappropriate. Political events and tendencies are seen as the natural and inescapable reflection of economic interests. Marx's concept of the political and ideological superstructure on the economic basis becomes a mere superstructure of the economic struggle, as one of the founders of the New Workers' Party recently put. Wait, hold on. I need to reread that. Okay. Political events and tendencies are seen as the natural and inescapable reflection of economic interest. Right. That is from this perspective of economic determinism, where social development is something merely natural, standing over and above men deciding their destinies, where political events and tendencies are seen as the natural and inescapable reflection of economic interest. Marx's concept of the political and ideological superstructure on the economic basis becomes a mere superstructure of the economic struggle. As one of the founders of the New Workers' Party recently put it. This implies that politics is only the froth of history. Whereas Marx was quite clear that it is in the sphere of politics that men more or less conscious of the economic contradictions, that men become more or less conscious of the economic contradictions and fight out the issues. Precisely in politics, in the struggle for state power, is the decisive conflict fought out. Trade union and industrial struggle is a school of politics for the working class. In the older capitalist countries, decades of trade union struggle were a necessary prelude to real class conflict. But the overthrow of political power and the institution of proletarian dictatorship is a qualitatively different question. For this, organization of a more advanced character and therefore theory of a much wider and deeper character is required. This means a political party which subordinates all partial struggle to the construction of a leadership firmly welded to the working class and completely devoted to the revolutionary overthrow of capitalism. Such a task requires the ability to learn from all past class struggles in society, particularly the failures and success of the working class movement, and an understanding of this history in relation to the total existing structure of society. Not only in relation to the daily experience of the working class, the consciousness and organization required to achieve the greatest social overturn in history. These are the basic reasons for what can be known as what has come to be known as democratic centralism, the bogey, so many left-wingers. The consciousness and organization required to achieve the greatest social overturn in history. These are the basic reasons for, I don't really get that sentence, but okay. You know what, I will highlight that. I'll highlight that. What is he talking about here, huh? What's he talking about? I'll take a small break. Go on my docs. It looks weird when I actually look at the picture. I should probably not do that, but it's hard not to. If I streamed like this all the time, I'd probably lose my voice. No, I'm getting distracted. I've got 3 screens. One of them is right here, and it's a chat thing. And I should just close that because I don't need the distraction. I don't need the Ryu Sakamoto. Anyway, I don't need those distractions. Excuse me. All right. The revolution. Oh, that's right. Okay. The Revolutionary Party must incorporate, as far as possible, the understanding of capitalist society derived from all past theoretical advances and their testing out by the working class movement in history. In this tradition and theory, there resides a more scientific truth that than the working class can derive from its experience of exploitation and day-to-day struggle. The Revolutionary Party must incorporate, as far as possible, the understanding of capitalist society derived from all past theoretical advances and their testing out by the working class movement in history. Okay, yeah. In this tradition and theory, there resides a more scientific truth than the working class can derive from its experience of exploitation and day-to-day struggle. Rather than humbly bowing before the experience of the class at the point of production, rather than assuming that the workers' own experience will give rise to revolutionary consciousness, Marxists must, on the contrary, subordinate their political and theoretical work to the Revolutionary Party. Excuse me. That was sure pretty of me, wasn't it? This is the meaning of revolutionary discipline, that the consciousness represented by the Marxist Party constitutes a higher consciousness of the historical tasks of the working class than does the immediate consciousness of the class itself. Okay, that seems important. Let me reread that again. I think I'm gonna, all right, that's a copy paste. That's a copy paste right there. That's a good one. Boop. 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 No. Oh, there we go. Let's go back there. All right. This is the meaning of revolutionary discipline, that the consciousness represented by the Marxist Party constitutes a higher consciousness of the historical tasks of the working class than does the immediate consciousness of the class itself. This is the meaning of revolutionary discipline, that the consciousness represented by the Marxist Party constitutes a higher consciousness of the historical tasks of the working class than does the immediate consciousness of class itself. Interesting. 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 Okay. Oh no. Where's my place? Only by accepting the discipline of the party. Only by accepting the discipline of the party, then does the individual Marxist achieve the prospect of playing an independent historical role. This has nothing in common with the bourgeois notion of free individuals imposing their reason upon the world. Rather, an objective analysis of capitalist production demonstrates that the working class is its gravedigger. The working class is consequently the only independent and decisive force in the modern epoch. But classes and social movements have to be welded together as forces by consciously grasping their situation and organizing to overthrow the classes which stand in their way. The relation between party and class is an aspect of this process. It is not enough for the workers to constitute a class objectively, by reasons of their own, by reason of their all being wage laborers. From being a class in itself, the proletariat must become a class for itself. I like that. I should reread it again. No. Yeah. I need water. Oh, blah. Sorry about that. I forgot what the sound effect was for scratching my face, but now it's. Only by accepting the discipline of the party, then does the. Okay, wait, no, let's go back. This is the meaning of revolutionary discipline, that the consciousness represented by the Marxist Party constitutes a higher consciousness of the historical tasks of the working class than does the immediate consciousness of the class itself. Only by accepting the discipline of the party, then, does the individual Marxist achieve the prospect of playing an independent historical role. This has nothing in common with the bourgeois notion of free individuals imposing their reason upon the world. Rather, an objective analysis of capitalist production demonstrates that the working class is its gravedigger. The working class is consequently the only independent and decisive force in the modern epoch. But classes and social movements have to be welded together as forces by consciously grasping their situation and organizing to overthrow the classes which stand in their way. The relation between party and class is an aspect of this process. It is not enough for the workers to constitute a class objectively, by reason of their all being wage laborers. From being hold on. The relation between party and class is an aspect of this process. It is not enough for the workers to constitute a class objectively, by reason of their all being wage laborers. From being a class in itself, the proletariat must become a class for itself. Okay. Now, Lenin's primary concern was to find the form. Oh, we're going to head into the Lenin's conception of the party, so that's finally answering what I was talking about before. And also, what was it? This section was called the role of consciousness in history, right? I feel like it's doing a good job of living up to the name of the subsection. That's just me. Now, Lenin's primary concern was to find the form of organization and strategy that would express this political independence of the working class. It is true that in Russia, his opponents, the Mensheviks, were victims of the mechanical idea that the bourgeoisie was destined to come to power after the defeat of Tsarism. They therefore disagreed with Lenin's notion of the proletariat leading the struggle against Tsarism. And so the political... Okay, Mensheviks believed that the bourgeoisie would lead the fight against Tsarism, and so they didn't place their eggs in the proletariat basket. They had a different idea about historical development, right? And that's where they diverged with, like, say, Lenin, what Lenin was thinking, I think. Well, with the Bolshevik party and whatnot. That's what it sounds like. I'm not confused. I'm not lost. I'm never lost. My tooth, like right here, is kind of like sensitive to cold and water. And I hate that because I know it means I really need to see a dentist. And I just haven't. I just keep forgetting and keep putting it off. My life is just one large series of putting things on. But okay, it's okay. It's okay. I don't know what happened. I lost the screen. Oh, what am I doing? There we go. Okay. Oh, 30 minutes, and I'm like, oh, not even halfway done. Might take more than an hour. We'll see. Praise be. Praise be to potato. All right, I'm going to reread this paragraph. Now, Lenin's primary concern was to find the form of organization and strategy which would express this political independence of the working class. It is true that in Russia, his opponents, the Mensheviks, were victims of the mechanical idea that the bourgeoisie was destined to come to power after the defeat of Tsarism. They therefore disagreed with Lenin's notion of the proletariat leading the struggle against Tsarism, and so the political independence of the class did not arise for them until after the bourgeois revolution. However, Lenin's conviction that the working class was the leading independent force in the modern era was part of his general view of imperialism as the final stage of capitalism. The fundamentals of organization required for a politically independent working class are not in any way specific to Russian conditions. Indeed, the essence of Lenin's position against the Mensheviks should be easier to grasp in a country which is highly mechanized, where a large proletariat confronts a bourgeoisie firmly established in power. Yes. Next section. Imperialism and Lenin's conception of the party. All right. It is important to stress the connection between Lenin's characterization of our epoch and his ideas on organization. Imperialism, with its rapid expansion of capital investment, the organization of production on a large scale, more and more domination by finance capital, and the concentration of standing armies and repressive forces equipped with weapons based on the highest levels of technique of mass production, has given rise to social forces and ideas which restrict and hold back the working class. In the imperialist countries themselves, a considerable stratum of the working class identifies its interests with the expansion of capitalism itself. The new bureaucratic state provides a larger number of administrative jobs for the upper layers of the working class and absorbs most of the disappearing old middle class, a new social group of functionaries, officials, managers, teachers. A new social group of functionaries, officials, managers, teachers has grown up. And on the basis of this group, together with the skilled working class, a strong opportunist tendency developed in the labor movement. In Britain, The early defeat of Chartism and the subsequent prolonged economic expansion excuse me, led to the development of craft unionism at the expense of political organization. When the new general unions had come on the scene and the need for independent political representation was recognized, it was not revolutionists who presented themselves as the leaders, but men with a very different standpoint. Fabianism started not from the conception of the working class as a revolutionary force, with the struggle for reforms as part of the building of that force, but from the idea that the state should intervene to alleviate the insecurity and poverty caused by the unrestricted operation of the capitalist market. The more extreme reformists thought that state ownership of certain industries might be necessary to achieve this. In Germany, although the Marxist phrases of the Erfurt, 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 the Erfurt program continued to dominate the statements of the social democratic leaders. A similar development was taking place. The SPD, German Social Democratic Party, became a church of the working class rather than a revolutionary party. Oh, makes sense. Interesting. Hmm. When the War of 1914 and 18 broke out, not only did the SPD deputies vote war credits to their national governments like almost every other reform party in Europe, they bolstered the service they had given the nation by helping create a disciplined, organized, and cultured working class. This conduct of the SPD at the outbreak of war closed a chapter in the history of Marxism. In the epoch of imperialist wars, there must be parties of men steeled to resist all jingoism and patriotism, to proclaim the slogan, turn the imperialist war into a civil war. The working class of each country had the duty of revolutionary defeatism, since the main question was one of cracking the front of imperialism. To many Orthodox Marxists, this turn by Lenin was a leap in the dark, adventurism, folly, typical of the Blanquist, voluntarist tendencies for which he had been so often criticized. But Lenin's fantastic slogan was deeper and nearer to the needs of the masses than all the realism of the old social democracy. The German social democratic leadership ended up at the height of the revolution in 1918, failing to support the demand for the Kaiser's abdication. They gave Marxist reasons for doing it. For the social democracy, the external form of the state is unimportant, and when pressure from below forced their hands, they issued a public statement to the effect that in insisting upon abdication, they had been motivated solely by the thought that only abdication could preserve order and prevent the spread of anarchy. Without a doubt, a big factor to the fright of the social democratic leaders was the fact that the Russian Bolsheviks were already in power, and there was no telling where the process might stop in Germany. But again, a Marxist rationalization was offered. Schneiderman said afterwards, political action can essentially only confirm an economic development. It was this kind of Marxism that Lenin had to defeat in the course of building a revolutionary party in Russia. His whole effort was to assert the dominance of the role of the proletariat in determining the course of history in the 20th century, a dominance flowing not from any voluntarism, but from the nature of the crisis of capitalism, the character of imperialism as the highest form of capitalist contradictions. His whole effort was to assert the dominance of the role of the proletariat in determining the course of history in the 20th century, a dominance flowing not from any voluntarism, but from the state of the crisis of capitalism. The character of imperialism is the highest form of capitalist contradictions. Sorry, My whole like throat mouth thing is getting kind of the teensiest bit tired. We'll make it through this. We'll make it through. We'll make it through. Me and you. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Kautsky and others in the old social democracy fell down on just this point. They were great exponents of Marxism as an explanatory theory of past history. But Marx's conclusion about the necessity of proletarian dictatorship on the basis of modern socialized production was not fully grasped. To do this meant seeing the working class, its consciousness, and its organization as themselves decisive forces in history, not just as the result of history. That is the meaning of Gramsci's remark at the head of this article. It is the direct opposition of Schneiderman's political action can only confirm an economic development, and of all nonsense about politics being only the superstructure of the class struggle. An interesting example of Lenin's method in these questions may be found in his writings during the period of reaction following the 1905 revolution. A certain Levitsky, somewhat in the strain of our own proletarian left-wingers, objected to the Bolshevik strategy of the working class leading the struggle for liberty against Tsarism. This he saw as a watering down of principle and advanced the slogan not hegemony in the national struggle for political liberty, but a class party. Lenin roundly condemned this sectarian nonsense, which amounted in effect to an abandonment of the political field to bourgeois leadership. Bourgeois leadership. Lenin roundly condemned this kind of sectarian nonsense. Hold on. An interesting example of Lenin's method in these questions may be found in his writings during the period of reaction following the 1905 revolution. A certain Levinsky, somewhat in the strain of our own proletarian left-wingers, objected to the Bolshevik strategy of the working class leading the struggle for liberty against Tsarism. This he saw as watering down the principle and advanced the slogan, not hegemony in the national struggle for political liberty, but a class party. Not hegemony. I'm confused. Kautsky and others in the old social democracy fell down on just this point. They were great exponents of Marxism as an explanatory theory of past history, but Marx's conclusion about the necessity of a proletarian dictatorship on the basis of modern socialized production was not fully grasped. Not surprised. To do this meant seeing the working class, its consciousness, and its organization as themselves decisive forces in history, not just as the result of history. That is the meaning of Gramsci's remarks at the head of the article. It is the direct opposition to Schneiderman's political action can only be an economic development, and all the nonsense about politics being only a superstructure of class struggle. An interesting example of Lenin's method in these questions can be found in his writings during the period of reaction following the 1905 revolution. A certain Levitsky, somewhat in the strain of his own proletarian left-wingers, objected to the Bolshevik strategy of the working class leading the struggle for liberty against Tsarism. This he saw as a watering down of principle and advanced the slogan, not hegemony in national struggle for political liberty, but a class party. I do not understand what he is talking about. What is Levitsky saying here? Like, I don't get it. Whatever. Either way, Lenin roundly condemned this sectarian nonsense, which amounted to, in effect, to an abandonment of the political field to bourgeois leadership. Interesting. Still a little confused. Spontaneity and sectarianism. Can I pause the stream? No. Okay. Well, just knowing that this is going to end up being recorded and that it's viewable in the future is definitely helping me to read this, which is good. That's a nice little like trick I can play on myself, especially since no one's ever going to actually watch these. But I'm kind of hungry, and I've been sitting here for 45 minutes. So I'm going to take a small break. And while I'm doing that, no, I'm not going to play music. What if it's like some sort of like, what if it's like bad and like it gets fucking like, what if it causes like a thing with copyright or some bullshit or whatever? I'm just going to let this sit or whatever. Skip forward like to when I'm back on the screen or something. If anyone actually watches this. Ay, ay, ay. Hell yeah. I've returned with tea. You can see the, oh yeah, look at that color. So good. It's perfect. Almost halfway through, almost 6 o'clock. What do you know? What are the odds? It's already been about an hour since I started. Gonna be like another hour before I'm done. All right then. All right then. Let's go. But I got the power of tea with me. Nothing quite like it. Spontaneity and sectarianism. It doesn't grip my hand, does it? In the Socialist Labor League recently, a small minority developed the idea that as the Labor Party was drifting rapidly to the right, the only way for the Marxists to preserve their integrity was to set up a party quite independent in every way from the Labor Party. The Labor Party had ceased to be a working class party in any sense, and a party must be formed which concentrated on the real class struggle at the base, the point of production. Hold on here. Is this where is it talking about Labor Party? Is this talking about in Britain? Or like the fucking in Germany? Like what? I'm like very confused now because it was just talking about Lenin and Lekitsky or whatever, and now it's talking about the Socialist Labor League, and I have no idea where the hell that is like taking place and where it is or what part of the world, what time period. Sorry for that. Or am I? In the Socialist Labor League recently. Okay, I'm going to assume this is taking place in Britain. This guy's name is like, what is it again? Cliff Slaughter. Oh man, what a name. Yeah, that doesn't tell me much. But I think it might be Britain or something. And this, I don't know. I'm just gonna stop speculating. In the Socialist Labor League recently, a small minority developed the idea that as the Labor Party was drifting rapidly to the right, the only way for the Marxists to preserve their integrity was to set up a party quite independent in every way from the Labor Party. The Labor Party had ceased to be a working class party in any sense, and a party must be formed which concentrated on the real class struggle at the base, the point of production. Not only did Behan and others show by this trend their utter misunderstanding of the Marxist theory of society and politics, but their conduct gave a valuable lesson in the political importance of theoretical weakness of this kind, showing that with an incorrect theoretical approach and a wrong method, first-class historical blunders can be made. Just when the crisis in the British working class movement approaches precisely, it's the British working class movement. I was right. What do you know? Just when the crisis in the British working class movement approaches precisely its political peak, just when the contradictions between social democracy and the historical needs of the working class is most sharply expressed in the issues of public ownership, defense, and the relations between the organized working class and the Labour Party, at this point, the cry goes up, abandon ship. It is the industrial struggle that matters above all. Reformism is the most resounding of... the reformism is best exposed at the point of production. Once again, those who fail to grasp the nettle of political action explain their failure with the most resounding of Marxist phrases. Precisely by clinging to such abstract generalities do men get left behind by superstructure, but to know when, where, and how to act. The essence of, Precisely by clinging to such abstract generalities do men get left behind by historical development. The essence of dialectics is not the ability to stand by and pronounce what is base and what is superstructure, but to know when, where, and how to act. That's a good one. That's quotable. Okay. Behan insists on the need to go back to the program of the Industrial Rank and File Conference of November 1958, and nothing has happened in the trade union movement and the Labor Party since then. As if nothing. Oh, yeah. To confine the demands and activity of the working class at this point to the factory level would amount to betrayal. This is what was meant by the reply given to Behan's group at the Socialist Labor League conference. Our resistance to sectarianism is not a doctrinal one only, but part of the lessons learned from the beheading of the German working class movement, among others, when the Communist Party failed to follow the policy of the United Front of the working class from 1929 onwards. To confine the demands and activity of the working class at this point to the factory level would amount to betrayal. This is what was meant by the reply given to Behan's group at the Socialist Labor League conference. Our resistance to sectarianism is not a doctrinal one only, but part of the lessons learned from the beheading of the German working class movement, among others, when the Communist Party failed to follow the policy of the United Front of the Working Class from 1929 onwards. Okay, interesting. I feel really stupid because now I'm like, what does sectarianism mean? Or maybe I'm just really smart because I notice that I don't know what it means. Wow. Oh, that's what I thought it meant. Just like a being super attached to a particular like division or like segment or group within to a set or like or to a party or something. Okay. I'm like dying inside all this reading. Oh my god. Like I understand like wouldn't make sense to anyone watching this. But like this is reading assigned days ago. And for whatever reason, my stupid brain, I'm like unable to get myself to do it like in a timely manner. Probably because I don't actually like, I'm not enjoying, like, I don't have like a real, I'm not really enjoying, I don't really enjoy it that much. I'm doing this because I'm compelled to, I'm driven to do it, not because it's fun. And it's not fun. It is not fun for me, but I do it because it seems important. And like, when I'm forcing myself to do something that is not fun, God, it's like pulling teeth, which is funny because I actually really enjoyed having my teeth pulled out when I got my wisdom teeth removed. So that's weird, right? But yeah. Oh, man. Why am I like this? I ask myself that all the time. Whatever, let's just upward and onward. Let's go. Oh, there's still so much. One of the interesting features of sectarians is their ability to take up very opportunist positions on certain questions, and particularly on questions of organization. Again, the basic theoretical weakness here is lack of understanding of the role of consciousness. To criticize Brian Behan's worker's voice would amount to the mistake of taking on not the strongest but the weakest statement of one's opponent's case. And so I take certain points in the first issue of that journal only as an aside, and in order to introduce some more general points. In line with this idea that the class itself must lead the revolution, Behan writes that any workers' organization, shop stewards committee, etc., may submit amendments to the Constitution of the Workers' Party. This gives an appearance, of course, of a party open to the working class, not dictated to it, but responding to it, and so on. But it is clearly only another example of the old economism. Certainly no workers' party will be successful which is not responsive to changes in the moods of the working class, but that is a matter of tactics, of timing, and the form of propaganda, etc., and certainly not a question of program, policy, constitution, which are determined on a basis of theory. The correctness of the policy of a Marxist party is not the extent to which it corresponds to the immediate consciousness of the workers. It is a matter, rather, of correct theoretical appraisal of all the social forces at work in a given period, including the role of the class and party itself. Interesting. Okay, well, that's another one. I want to go ahead and clip that. That sounds interesting. I'm just trying to I'm just imagining my mouth going in like a square, like a round square. Kind of like weirdly in my mind, it's like the Predator from the movie Predator, and it's like I don't know. It seems fun to me in that moment somehow for some reason. Anyway, whatevs. Okay. This raises the old question of the working class throwing up its own leadership in times of struggle. It is a fact that in every section of the working class, there springs up first-class militants with great organizing power and the ability to advance the consciousness of their fellow workers. Without such spontaneous rank-and-file leadership, there could be no talk of revolution. But a revolutionary leadership is not just the sum of all the rank-and-file leaders, not just the linking together of rank and file committees. There must be, beyond that, above that level, a political leadership. And it is not just a matter of daily struggle between employers and workers, which might even culminate in one big strike, but the conquest of state power and asserting the revolutionary role of the working class in the transformation of every aspect of capitalist society. The place of the workers in capitalist production is the basis of the revolutionary historical role. But to assert that role, they have to be organized politically and theoretically, as well as industrially. And the theory required to do this represents a higher form of consciousness than that which flows from the experience of the proletariat. If Lenin was right to condemn the economists for bringing no theory to the Russian workers other than the news that their industrial struggles were vital, how much more necessary it is to insist on advancing the theory required by the British working class movement with its scores of years of industrial organization, its opportunist leadership, and the complex international problems of leadership that have developed since Lenin's day. This brings out another fundamental weakness of sectarianism, its tendency towards idealism. All the talk about no compromises and keeping clear of the rottenness of reformism amounts to a fear of rubbing up against reality, and is accompanied by the search for some sections of workers, which remains unaffected and pure despite the economic boom, as a jumping-off ground to defeat reformism. No doubt, it is a healthy reaction against bureaucratic reformism to insist on the roots of militancy in the working class itself, but there is no substitute for fighting the political battle. It is not enough to know that reformism is rotten, to condemn it roundly, and to insist on one's separateness from it. And the point is to take it seriously as a force in the British working class and defeat it on the arena of struggle. At this point, the political mistake of sectarianism ties in with the theoretical mistake of economic determinism or economism. Somehow, it is assumed the working class will develop revolutionary consciousness because it is exploited. But the ideological struggle within the working class is real. It has to be bitterly fought and won before the class can be fully mobilized for battle. When we say that the long drawn-out crisis of British imperialism rots away the social basis of reformist politics, that is not to say that the reformists simply leave the scene and leave a vacant place for a naturally radicalized working class desiring a new form of party. Such a party has to be built in the course of struggle with the reformists, and it has to be built by those who grasp the historical process theoretically. It does not grow naturally or organically out of the economic base. That's a really good point. That's a really good point. That's a really good point. Let's see here. I'm gonna skip some of this because some of this is good shit. Just good shit. Let's see. Yeah, it's gonna take that whole clip. I want to also take the it has. Yeah, I want to add the italics. Give me them italics, baby. Where is it? Oh, and I could just use the fucking keys. Hold on. Demonetized. You cursed. No money for you. I mean, I wasn't going to monetize this anyways. Who are we kidding? This isn't worth anything. Ooh. They've returned with the food. They got food. I'm excited. Kind of want to reread that paragraph because that was really good. I mean, like this was good stuff. This brings out another fundamental weakness of sectarianism. It tends towards idealism. I'm going to copy that too. I'm loving it. My phone made a sound, made a noise. I'll be back. I'm going to go check on whether or not I've got my teriyaki bowl. Sadness. The teriyaki bowl has not arrived. Unfortunately, I'm still waiting for it. I'm gonna starve. Actually, no. I'm not gonna starve. I probably shouldn't even eat the whole teriyaki bowl. We'll see what happens. Go away, phone. Let's see here. Okay, I need to stop that. What if someone actually does watch this? They see how much of a fucking goofy nut I am. You like that? I'm just joking. I'm sorry. Let's see here. Let's keep moving. Whew. Someone someone was late to getting the food, and they were freaking out a little bit. I hope she's okay. It's all right. It's all right if the food had to wait a little bit. It's okay. They won't throw it out. I'm sure people are more late than she was. It's fine. No. Okay, I think I'm officially at the halfway mark. It's been an hour and a half since I started. My tongue is kind of colored. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. It's from the tea. When we say that political ideas and movements reflect the economic base, we should remember that such reflection is a series of conscious acts. That also seems cool. Men's consciousness is formed in an environment of social institutions controlled by the ruling class, institutions of repression, and institutions of educational conditioning, staffed by people trained to operate these institutions as though they were part of a naturally or divinely ordained system. Yeah, that's such a good clip right there. I'm just gonna copy this whole fucking thing at this rate. Excuse me. What is it, phone? My goodness. My love. No, see, having the camera on me makes it so much easier to put my phone down. I should do this regularly. I'm sure it will help me to be less distracted about my reading. Sparkles. I got sparkles on my finger. Do you want sparkles? Let's see here. All right. When we say that political ideas and movements reflect the economic base, we should remember that such reflection is a series of conscious acts. Man's consciousness is formed in an environment of social institutions controlled by the ruling class, institutions of repression, and institutions for educational conditioning, staffed by people trained to operate these institutions as though they were part of a naturally or divinely ordained system. The majority of labor's own organizations have become tied to this structure of established institutions and are staffed by the labor lieutenants of capitalism. The proletariat's consciousness of it has of its the proletariat's consciousness of its role has to be achieved in struggle against all these institutional forms and their ideological results. Oh my God, I read that really stupidly. Okay. The proletariat's consciousness of its role has to be achieved in struggle against all these institutional forms and their ideological results. Very true. It's a good point. Without the highest degree of centralized organization, these ideological battles cannot be run. Run. Who's running? Am I running? Let's see. The crisis of imperialism, which is expressed in the colonial struggle, the arms race and atomic war, as well as in the tendency towards slump, constantly produces cultural decay and breakdown. Movements of the extreme right, like fascism, are able to call upon depraved elements of the intelligentsia to mobilize petty bourgeois, lumpen proletarians, and even numbers of industrial workers behind the most foul and hideous social programs. The alternative of socialism or barbarism did not pose itself only after Hiroshima, but was clearly before the eyes of the Bolsheviks and Rosa Luxemburg during the First World War. We are in an epoch which has been correctly characterized as one of a crisis of leadership. What is needed above all is a strongly disciplined leadership able to develop theory of imperialism, the permanent revolution, the relation between the workers' states and the world revolution, and to establish its leadership of the working class. Unless the crisis of leadership is solved, there will be no natural growth towards socialism, but there will be all the danger of war and barbarism. In this vital sense, those who protest against vanguardism, against too much centralization, represent a reactionary tendency in the working class movement. The opponents of democratic centralism like to talk about the inevitable crisis of capitalism as the source of revolutionary action in the working class. Oof. Having weird feelings in my stomach. The opponents of democratic centralism like to talk about the inevitable crisis of capitalism as the source of revolutionary action in the working class. This is counterposed to the so-called voluntarism of the Leninists, who are supposed to think they can suck revolutionary situations out of their thumbs. But preparation of the class and of the party is the decisive question in social crisis. It is true that periodically capitalism has undergone the most profound crises. We need only mention the Great Crash of 1929 and the consequent depression and the post-war situation of 1945 in Europe. When there returned, particularly in France and Italy, capitalists discredited by their war record and faced with the armed working class. In neither of these cases was revolution the outcome. Instead, helped by the social democratic and Stalinist betrayals of the working class, the capitalists were able to ride the storm, and in the earlier case, to establish regimes which destroyed the possibility of revolution for many years. The elementary mistake is supposing that in the Marxist view, consciousness and organization directly reflect economic need, or I'm like waiting for food. That is what's happening right now. I'm like, oh, are they here? Is my teriyaki bowl arrived? I can only just wait. I hate waiting. I am not a very patient person. I can be very patient sometimes, and then I can be extremely impatient other times. I hate that inconsistency about me, but whatever. Instead, helped by the social democratic and Stalinist betrayals of the working class, the capitalists were able to ride the storm, and in the earlier case, to establish regimes which destroyed the possibility of revolution for many years. The elementary mistake of supposing that the Marxist view of that in the Marxist view, okay, hold on here. The elementary mistake of supposing that, in the Marxist view, consciousness and organization directly reflect economic need is one that must be conquered if there is to be a victorious revolution. The ideological reflection of changes in the economy lags behind. The ideological reflection of changes in the economy lags behind. The machinery of this lag is the structure of ruling class power and education. There is necessarily a theoretical leap in the working class movement. The development of leadership which can grasp the significance of the underlying crisis in society and inform the activity of the class with that consciousness. What is important for the revolutionary class is that it must not remain determined in its thinking by the existing economy and institutions. As Gramsci put it, an appropriate political initiative is always necessary to free the economic drive from the tethers of traditional policies. That's a good one. Oh, I'm not feeling good. It's from the tea. I don't know if you've ever had like tea on an empty stomach. It makes you feel like shit. Not having it. Not having it today. Why did I do that? Important here is the difference between the working class and other revolutionary classes in history. When Lenin says that the only weapon of the working class is organization, he means that whereas the rising bourgeoisie, for instance, he means that whereas the rising, oh, I'm feeling like sick and like like really Important here is the difference between the working class and other revolutionary classes in history. When Lenin says that the only weapon for the working class is organization, he means that whereas the rising, where means that when Lenin says the only weapon of the working class is organization, he means that whereas the rising bourgeoisie, for instance, developed its own economy, its art, its religion, its schools, its philosophy, and so on, as the expression and organization of its social consciousness before the political overthrow of the feudal political system. The proletariat does not construct the institutions of the new society within capitalism, despite the Fabians and the New Left. Capitalism is the only system of production in history whose inner dynamism has pushed it to develop the productive forces incessantly and to drive out all other forms of production. In order to mobilize for the overthrow of feudalism, it was sufficient for the bourgeoisie and its allies to recognize and feel the political restrictions upon their growing economic and cultural strength. Their own organic development within feudalism drove their own institutions into conflict with the political regime, which prevented their natural expansion. But bourgeois power is total social power. Capital dominates all relationships like an elemental natural force. In order to seize in consciousness the nature of this power and to organize for its overthrow, there is necessary a scientific consciousness of the whole system of social relations, not just a sense of the degradation and exploitation suffered in the process of production, or the abstract knowledge that planned production for use would be more reasonable. There is no repository of this consciousness and no guarantee of its necessary constant development in theory and practice, other than the proletarian party. To talk about the working class itself is as an undifferentiated, potentially revolutionary whole is to substitute myth for reality. That's a really interesting paragraph. I think my food's here. All right. Obviously, no one here could possibly, no one watching this would ever possibly want to watch me eat, I think. So, this is not a mukbang. This is a reading. you know? But certainly I can't read with my mouth full. I'm so close to being. No, I'm not that close to being done. I'm like just over halfway. Food break. I'm going to keep going. I'm not going to end it yet. See, if I stop the stream, I'm not going to continue. And like, I don't want to go back to the like suffering I was doing earlier when I was trying to read. So I'm going to keep my head down. And if anyone is watching this, then just skip forward to the part where I'm not eating. Because my head will be back up again. So you'll know. I finished that teriyaki bowl, and it has like revitalized me. I have reached revolutionary consciousness. I am ready to continue this reading. I'm just gonna throw this away. And, saying, saying, I'm going to do this. I need water. Oh, all right. Fucking hell. All right, let's see what we can do in about an hour and a half. Important here is the difference between the working class and other revolutionary classes in history. When Lenin says that the only weapon of the working class is organization, he means that whereas the rising bourgeoisie, for instance, developed its own economy, its art, its religion, its schools, its philosophy, and so on, as the expression and organization of its social consciousness before the political overthrow of the feudal political system, the proletariat does not construct the institutions of the new society within capitalism, despite the Fabians and the New Left. Capitalism is the only system of production in history whose inner dynamism has pushed it to develop the productive forces incessantly and to drive out all other forms of production. In order to mobilize for the overthrow of feudalism, it was sufficient for the bourgeoisie and its allies to recognize and feel the political restrictions upon their growing economic and cultural strength. Their own organic development within feudalism drove their own institutions into conflict with the political regime, which prevented their natural expansion. But bourgeois power is total social power. Sorry, my lips are really tasty right now. Hold on a moment. All right. I'm very tired. In order to mobilize for the overthrow of feudalism, it was sufficient for the bourgeoisie and its allies to recognize and feel the political restrictions upon their growing economic and cultural strength. Their own organic development within feudalism drove their own institutions into conflict with the political regime, which prevented their natural expansion. But bourgeois power is total social power. Capital dominates all relationships like an elemental natural force. In order to seize in consciousness the nature of this power and to organize for its overthrow, there is necessary a scientific consciousness of the whole system of social relations, and not just a sense of the degradation and exploitation suffered in the process of production, or the abstract knowledge that planned production for use would be more reasonable. There is no repository to this consciousness, and no guarantee of its necessary constant development in theory and practice, other than the proletarian party. To talk about the working class itself as an undifferentiated, potentially revolutionary whole is to substitute myth for reality. Hmm. Hmm. Excuse me. Yes, I'm very slurpy and burpy, and I'm a noisy gal. What can I say? Noisy gal. Whatever. Because it is exploited in an inhuman system, commandeered and degraded in the service of capital, the working class is unevenly developed, apathetic under most circumstances, split into different sections, often backwards in its view of most cultural and social problems, unless there is a conscious leadership differentiated from the class itself, not at the daily service of capital, determined to explode the false consciousness in which men grasp reality under capitalism. Abdication from the responsibility of constructing such a leadership under the guise of faith in the workers themselves is capitulation to the forces that numb the consciousness of the working class, the institutions of capitalist society itself. What a strong, powerful statement that I appreciate. I think it's true. Let's see. The centralized party is needed by the working class, then, for the purpose of breaking up the unity based on traditional ideology, without which the new force, the working class, would be unable to gain awareness of its own independent personality. The working class cannot make do like the bourgeoisie in its revolutionary period or the crude empiricism or idealism. Because the whole because the whole of the capitalist structure must be grasped in consciousness, and because this whole and its laws of development are different from the immediate consciousness and experience of the proletariat. Dialectical theory, advanced theory based on the notion of developing contradictions in the material world, is the basic element of revolutionary theory. Marx's achievement was to show the working class a mode of action based on this dialectical approach to history. Bourgeois thought had ceased to develop just at this point, and took the highest synthesis of philosophical and scientific thought to make the leap forward. It is in this sense that one should understand Lenin's insistence that the program and strategy of the Revolutionary Party are based on theory, and that this theory is brought to the working class from outside, from bourgeois intellectuals. The development of theory among the revolutionary workers themselves, once that leap has been made, is, of course, a necessity for any revolutionary party, so long as the working class is not mobilized by a party based on such a theory, its consciousness remains determined by bourgeois culture, a culture that leads man to see society as a set of separate things, not open to his own control and overthrow, but naturally fixed with an independent reality. Marxist theory explains, on the other hand, that the world of men is a man-made world, that the powers standing over men are products of labor, and that if the whole system of labor exploitation is abolished, man will become free, will dominate social reality instead of being at its mercy. A revolutionary party is one whose strategy and tactics flow from this total conception. Without it, the working class struggles only against partial features of bourgeois domination, and, unable to see their connection, tends to fall back into partial victories and fall back after partial victories and defeats. Let's see, can I? I've got my thumb on the hole. Look at that. No, I'm just this thing's actually not quite long enough for that. But whatever. I've said that a lot now, I think. But whatever. But whatever. That's such a big chunk, but it's like really worth thinking about. All right. Revolutionary crisis in the vanguard party. Of course, the building of a leadership capable of theoretical firmness and of combating those tendencies in the labor movement which reflect other classes is not the whole of the task is not the whole of the task by a long way. The actual organization in a revolutionary crisis, the rapid changes of tactics necessary, the planning of insurrection and military operations, all this quite clearly requires centralized authority and discipline of the highest order. And only a leader. Oh, hold on here. Of course, the building of a leadership capable of theoretical firmness and of combating those tendencies in the labor movement which reflect other classes is not the whole of the task by a long way. The actual organization of a revolutionary crisis, the rapid changes of tactics necessary, the planning of insurrection and military operations, all this quite clearly requires centralized authority and discipline of the highest order, and only a leadership developed over a long period will be capable of the task. While this phase of the development of the working class leadership is not our immediate subject, a few general. Oh, my keyboard is dying. It's losing life. It is becoming dead. Can't let that happen. Don't want that to happen. All right, there we go. There we go. There we go. That's right. I changed my face to this goofy ass fucking face. Stop. Distracting myself again. Oh boy. Constantly being distracted. I'm so tired. I'm so tired. Of course, the building of a leadership capable of the actual organization in a revolutionary crisis, the rapid changes of tactics necessary, the planning of insurrection and military operations, all this quite clearly requires centralized authority and discipline of the highest order, and only a leadership developed over a long period will be capable of the task. While this phase of the development of the working class leadership is not our immediate subject, a few general points to be made clear here. Certain anti-vanguardist groupings, such as the represented by the Journal of Socialisme au Pauvre, put forward the idea that the nearer the revolution approaches and the more the working class itself fills the historical stage, so the leadership must prepare for its own dissolution. It is difficult to see exactly what that can mean, but at best, it probably means that as the class itself approaches a revolutionary consciousness, the leadership can safely quit the scene. Of course, the outstanding characteristic of revolutions is the entry of the broadest masses into public action. But that is a very different notion from supposing that consciousness of the historical process is clearly fixed in the minds of the people. The possibility of victory in such crisis depends above all on the preparation of a leadership, and is inextricably bound up with the earlier phases discussed in this article. Those masses intervening in revolutionary actions are what Lenin called the untrained, undisciplined, undirected forces. The depth of the crisis arouses tremendous force, but the great task of the party, the disciplined, trained units, is to give this force its maximum results, and to make sure that it is not broken against a wall, dissipated in useless channels, and so on. Rosa Luxemburg, whose shabby friends emphasize her weakest point, are incapable of learning from her strength. Rosa Luxemburg, whose shabby friends emphasize her weakest point and are incapable of learning from her strength, encountered this dilemma in January 1919. The working class in Berlin was led by rioters and provocateurs to expose itself to bloody repression by the Social Democratic government. The young Communist Party had had no time to organize the insurrection or to knit together its followers in the rest of Germany. Such a situation could confront the most mature leadership, and the correct lead to the workers would be to sound a tactical retreat, as the Bolsheviks did in the July days of 1917. But the German communists lacked the authority and confidence for such a lead, and the suppression of the Berlin riots was only the beginning of the terrible carnage of 1919, as workers in city after city took up arms against the government, only to be crushed and murdered in thousands. Rosa Luxemburg had criticized Lenin's essentialism and overstress on organization, and she had trusted a little too much the organic growth of the struggle of the working class, even though she had realized before Lenin the reactionary tendency of Kautsky and the German Social Democratic leadership. She lacked Lenin's political sense and initiative in seeing the need for organizational expression in the opposition tendency in the European socialism. It was not a question only of the right wing having fallen into conservative habits of distorting Marxism, but of the victory of an alien class tendency in the movement. And since the world had entered the final stage of capitalism, the construction of a leadership devoted unswervingly to political independence of the proletariat was vital. Because this conclusion was not drawn earlier, because Rosa clung to the view that an ideological, not organizational, struggle within the movement would be sufficient to win the working class, the left turn of the masses in November 1918 in Germany did not result in automatic support for Rosa's Spartacists, the future communists, but for the independent socialists, who appeared to the masses as the left of social democracy. In other words, the shift in the masses was not automatically reflected in revolutionary politics, but was mediated through the existing organizations and forms of consciousness. One of the favorite references for opponents of the centralized vanguard party conception of the Paris Commune. Hold on. Okay. Rosa Luxemburg had criticized Lenin's centralism and overstress on organization, and she had trusted a little too much to the organic growth of the struggle of the working class. Even though she had realized before Lenin the reactionary tendency of Kautsky and German democratic leadership, she lacked Lenin's political sense and initiative in seeing the need for organizational expression of the opposition tendency in European socialism. It was not a question only of the right wing having fallen into conservative habits of distorting Marxism, but the victory of an alien class tendency in the movement. And since the world had entered the final stage of capitalism, the construction of a leadership devoted unswervingly to the political independence of the proletariat was vital. Because this conclusion was not drawn earlier, because Rosa clung to the view that an ideological, not organizational, struggle within the movement could be sufficient to win the working class, the left turn of the masses in November 1918 in Germany did not result in automatic support for Rosa's Spartacists, the future communists. but for the independent socialists, who appeared to the masses as the left of social democracy. In other words, the shift in the masses was not automatically reflected in revolutionary politics, but was mediated through the existing organizations and forms of consciousness. Hmm. 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 It's 2 more subsections after this. I think I'm gonna do it. Boy, I am kind of gross, aren't I? Finally stopped slurping. Let's see if I can keep that going. One of the favorite references for opponents of the centralized vanguard party conception of the Paris Commune of 1870. One of the favorite references for opponents is the Paris Commune. Okay. It was as a result of the brief experience of workers' rule in that city that Marx sharpened his view on the state and revolution. It was now clear, he said, that the bourgeois state must be smashed, not taken over, and that the new state, the proletarian dictatorship, must be the rule of the workers themselves. Latter-day critics of Leninism hold up this picture as a contrast to the centralized dictatorship of Stalin's state and Lenin's party, but in the process, they make a mistake which Marx himself could never have made. The conclusions drawn from the Commune about the form of the proletarian dictatorship are not in any way the same thing as the requirements of a revolutionary party to conquer power. The conclusions drawn from the Commune about the form of the proletarian dictatorship are not in any way the same thing as the requirements of a revolutionary party to conquer power. Socialism al Barbary and similar tendencies argue directly from the form of the future proletarian state to the character of the Workers' Party under capitalism. But such a party must above all be capable of action and leadership, and it is not identical with the class. We have mentioned the argument that in revolutionary situations, the class itself comes to the fore and makes the leadership more and more superfluous. Perhaps the best antidote to that argument comes from Marx himself. In a letter to Kugelmann, he made a criticism of the political leadership of the Commune, which sets him quite apart from those who invoke him against the Leninists. He criticized the Central Committee of the National Guard for holding democratic elections at a time when it should have exerted authority, prolonged its dictatorship in order to crush the enemy. For this, the best proletarian sorry, my neck is just. Sorry, I didn't mean to show you my tongue. I shouldn't do that. It's kind of gross. I just did it again. Oh my god, did you see that? Fuck. I just cussed. Oh no. I'm so tired. I'm so tired. For this, the best proletarian elements would have to go to the front, and so a more stringent regime would have been necessary to retain revolutionary authority in Paris itself. But in the absence of a firm revolutionary leadership, it was decided that democracy must have its day. The Commune was defeated. This was only part of the consequences of a lack of preparation and revolutionary organization before the Commune. Hold on. There it is. Okay. All right. Lenin and inner party struggle. Woo! Lenin's firmness and sharpness in defending his political line and organizational discipline was derived precisely from his necessity for training a contingent. Getting distracted again. If anyone watches this, This is just how I am. I'm sorry. What can I say? Lenin and inter-party struggle. Lenin's firmness and sharpness in defending his political line and organizational discipline was derived precisely from this necessity for training a contingent which will not be overrun by the irregular troops of the revolution, and not at all to any personal ambition or dictatorial habits, as his opponents unceasingly declared. Bolsheviks were determined to base their party only on the firmest theoretical principles and to subordinate all party work to these principles. A movement of this kind examines scrupulously all political ideas in the light of the needs of the working class and the party, and ruthless fights against all tendencies which divert the movement from its revolutionary path. The method of analysis is always to test these ideas against the needs of the classes in society, both in theoretical argument and in the work of the party. In the course of the 1903 conference, the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, scene of the famous dispute against Lenin and Martov over the conditions of party membership, Trotsky and others of the Iskra group originally supported Lenin's political line, but found themselves driven towards the opportunists by what they considered to be Lenin's organizational rigidity. Trotsky later gave his verdict on this episode, and it is worth quoting as an anecdote to those who are fond of using Trotsky's early writings about dictatorship over the party. It was not for nothing, says Trotsky, in my life, that the words irreconcilable and unsparring occurred so frequently in Lenin's vocabulary. Only the highest concentration of the goal of the revolution, free from everything pettily personal, can justify this kind of personal ruthlessness. His behavior seemed to me inadmissible, terrible, shocking. Yet at the same time, it was politically correct and therefore indispensable from the point of view of organization. It is in this very important sense that the lessons of building the Bolshevik Party are lessons for all revolutionaries. The whole method of building the party politically is involved. Lenin, who had agreed with Martov on political questions at the beginning of the Congress, quite agreed that his difference over the rules was a small one. It became important in the course of the Congress, as it became clear from this one opportunist formulation, Martov was to fall into the hands of the opportunists. As it became clear in order to preserve the narrow circle atmosphere at the head of the immigrant Marxists, he was prepared to line up with the opportunists in opposition to Lenin. Lenin was not only insisting on organizational points when he hammered home the authority of the Congress and the leading role of the majority. Iskarites, including Martov, had not gone to Congress with a factional mandate that would deny the supreme authority of the Congress, always so dearly cherished by Lenin. But what they did agree on Lenin's insistence was to accept all the decisions of the Congress. It seemed innocent enough at the time, as Lenin wrote, but once unfavorable decisions, e.g. on the composition of Iskr's editorial board, were arrived at, the discipline was broken. Lenin convinced that without a proletarian party of iron discipline, there could be no revolution, was prepared to subordinate everything to insistence on this task. Martov's indiscipline and veering towards the opportunists was a capitulation to the bourgeois tendency in the party, the tendency which shrank from independent mobilization of the working class for leadership against Tsarism. Hence, a split was necessary. Political and organizational questions, therefore, cannot be separated in an epoch where the construction of a leadership with the working class is the most vital historical problem. It is exactly on the questions of concrete planning and discipline for revolutionary work that political differences became explicit. Some Marxists seem to conceive of the party as simply a contractual discipline to stop individuals from going off the rails, as they react to class pressure. But it is more than that. It must become the vanguard of revolutionary action, the representative of the general interest of the working class. In the construction of a revolutionary party, there is a constant need to strive to maintain a correct relationship between democracy and centralism. The balance of this relationship tends to change with the objective situation. Maintain a correct relationship between democracy and centralism. I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make it. Nope, let's keep going. I just spaced out there for a second. My God. Fuck. In the construction of a revolutionary party, there is a constant need to strive to maintain a correct relationship between democracy and centralism. The balance of this relationship tends to change with the objective situation. During times when the revolutionary movement operates under legal conditions, as in Britain today, it is essential to have full democratic discussion on all questions concerning working class and the party. This does not, however, mean that democracy is a free-for-all with nothing being decided. To the Marxist, democracy is a weapon in the struggle against capitalism. Discussion is necessary to arrive at decisions upon which the activity of the party can be based. Constant training of new leaders in the Revolutionary Party requires the greatest patience by the leadership, local autonomy, and initiative, allowing the leaders and the rank and file to learn from their mistakes, is essential for the branches of the Revolutionary Party. The more experienced the revolutionary leadership, the more flexible it will be in assisting the ranks by theory and practice to understand the needs of a democratic centralist party. In such an atmosphere, differences of opinion can flourish, provided such differences do not set out to overthrow the program and policy of the Marxist movement. The fundamental differences along these lines in an unfavorable objective situation generally lead to a split. Splits of this kind cannot be avoided, and a mature leadership will see to it that the experiences of such a struggle are utilized to educate a membership in the superiority of the democratic centralist method. Any premature attempt to resolve the internal crisis based upon excessive centralization and factionalism will have serious consequences for the Revolutionary Party. That is why a revolutionary. Oh, that's important. As a revolutionary leadership must be the most vigilant custodian of political party democracy and the firmest defender of the discipline and rights of the party as a whole. It is the interrelationship between democracy and centralism that constantly confuses the idealist opponents of Leninist organization. In their effort to run away from centralism, they embrace a theory of spontaneity and proceed to liquidate the party into the class. Bad. We need the party. We really need the party. We need the party. Class consciousness does not just come from suffering class. Just does not come from suffering bourgeois exploitation. That's not how you reach class consciousness. And having like the right morals or moral attitude is not necessarily is not going to make up for a lack of organization and discipline and party discipline. Effective party discipline and organization can make up for a lack of a proper moral attitude. Formal rules and etiquette trump. Formal rules and etiquette trump, good morals every time. That is why revolutionary leadership. Marx's interpretation of democratic centralism is part of the fact that he derives his political conclusions from an objective historical study of the political situation, and not only from the existing consciousness of the class. The relation between democracy and centralism to him is based upon the constant requirements of the class struggle. The great problem in Britain today is to obtain a Marxist conception of the party. Capitalist propaganda constantly seeks to equate Marxist discipline with Stalinism. When socialist opponents of revolutionary discipline make the same equation, they are reflecting capitalist public opinion. Regardless of the good intentions in this sense, they play a definite part in obstructing the solution by the working class of its most pressing need. Hmm. Theoretical differences. Theoretical differences. Theoretical differences and practical consequences. One aim of this article is to make a little clearer the reasons why Marxists concentrate so much attention on theoretical discussions, even on questions which appear at times to be obscure and remote from the struggle. There are always critics who say the important. There are always critics who say the important thing is to get on with the struggle and get away from these arid and doctrinaire wrangling. A good example is the Russian question. The nature of Soviet society is a vital question for Marxists, and it can only be studied historically. After the Khrushchev exposures of 1956, certain prominent New Left ex-communists said quite explicitly that Russia had dominated the left for too long, and that in future we should concentrate on contemporary British problems. There were only jeers for those who wanted to know what Trotsky said in 1924, and yet without a study of the social roots of Stalinism, rather than the horrified turning of one's back on it, there could be no renewal of Marxism. Even if the 1920s in Russia seemed irrelevant to British problems in 1956, it was an essential clue to the balance of forces in the class struggle and the play of tendencies in the labor movement of the world. Not only that, but the very existence of the USSR, its bureaucracy's domination over great parties all over the world, and its relationship with imperialism, all the time create situations where one's evaluation of the Soviet social system takes on immediate importance. And for the movement to leave the question open is inadmissible. I see the crystal raindrops fall, and the beauty of it all is when the sun comes shining through to make those rainbows in my. I must now do this. That's fun. I'm my grandma's child. I'd like to think she'd be proud of me. And that she would love for me to make her a cocktail. She'd love for me to light her cigarette and make her a cocktail. A good example is the Russian question. After the Khrushchev exposures of 1956, certain prominent New Left ex-communists said quite explicitly that Russia had dominated the left for too long, and in the future, we should concentrate on contemporary British problems. There were only jeers for those who wanted to know what Trotsky said in 1942, 1924, and yet, without a study of the social roots of Stalinism, other than the horrified turning of one's back on it, there could be no renewal of Marxism. There were only jeers for those who wanted to know what Trotsky said in 1924. And yet, without a study of the social roots of Stalinism, rather than the horror, and yet, what the fuck? Okay, all right, I understand now. There were only jeers for those who wanted to know what Trotsky said in 1924. And yet, without a study of the social roots of Stalinism, rather than the horrified turning of one's back on it, there could be no renewal of Marxism. Even if the 1920s in Russia seemed irrelevant to British problems in 1956, it was an essential clue to the balance of forces in the class struggle and the play of tendencies in the labor movement of the world. Not only that, but the very existence of the USSR, its bureaucracy, its domination over great parties all over the world, and its relationship with imperialism, all the time create situations where one's evaluation of the Soviet system takes on immediate importance. And for the movement to leave the question open is inadmissible. One tendency which attracts a certain number of Marxists is that which considers the USSR's economy to be state capitalism. Now, the actual consideration of state capitalism as a theory cannot be undertaken here, but some of its adherents illustrate very well the connection between organizational and political questions.
Hey guys, check who I'm hanging with. It's Dina. What up, Dina? Oh, look at her go. Oh, she's excited. Oh, she's so excited. Look at her go. There's a happy turtle.
Just in time for. One tendency attracts certain remarks accuse USSR's economy to be state capitalism. Now, the actual consideration of state capitalism as a theory cannot be undertaken here, but some of its adherents illustrate very well the connection between organizational and political questions. The claim that the USSR is state capitalist is usually accompanied by the view that American, British, and all advanced capitalisms are tending in the same direction as the USSR, towards a bureaucratic, state-controlled, if not state-owned industry, with the workers exploited in ever larger productive units. As in Burnham's managerial revolution, the product of a similar breakaway from revolutionary Marxism in 1940. The tendency of such theories is to assume that this bureaucratic centralization, stratification, managerialism actually corresponds to the needs of science and technique at the very present level of development, that it represents a naturally higher stage than imperialism. So one is tempted to conclude either that all talk of the working class as a revolutionary force is nonsense, Burnham, or at least that the age that the age of imperialism, with all the political collusions drawn from it by Lenin, lie in the past. In the latter case, what is required is a completely new analysis to tell us what sort of contradictions dominate the new society and what sense a revolutionary class might overthrow it, whether that class is the working class, etc. What is usually done, and it is very unsatisfactory, is to cling to the idea of the working class as revolutionary while rejecting the economic basis, capitalism and imperialism, for this, and the organizational consequences drawn by Marxists. As a result, we get among the state capitalists a very abstract general protest against tyranny and oppression, in many cases a strong leaning towards anti-totalitarianism in the style of the Cold War or State Department socialists. Lenin's organizational conceptions are seen as disastrous, for they pave the way for Stalin's dictatorship. A dictatorship not of the working class, but over the working class. Bureaucracy in itself is seen as reactionary, since it offends against the idea of self-government by the working class. Currently circulating in translation is the programmatic statement of the group around the French journal Socialisme au Peuple. This document, entitled Socialism Reaffirmed, arrives at the following conclusions. Moreover, the objective existence of the bureaucracy as an exploiting stratum makes it obvious that the vanguard can only organize itself on the basis of anti-bureaucratic ideology. The main features of a political organization that has become aware of the need to abolish the distinction in society between people who decide and people who merely execute is that an organization should, from the outset, seek to abolish such distinction within its own ranks. In place of the concrete development of organizational forms from the specific development of stages of the class struggle and of the type of social crisis, in place of the concrete developmental organizational forms from the specific development of stages of the class struggle and of the type of social crises rising under capitalism, indeed reacting in a quite topsy-turvy way to the growing concentration of bourgeois state power, we have the abstract argument from general principles. Okay. Some of we are asked to accept that authority in itself is a bad thing, indeed the main enemy. Right. Sounds familiar. This is really a retreat from Marxism. It is not bureaucratic or authority-wielding individuals who rule the lives of men under capitalism, but the force of capital, produced by men, yet alienated from them in a structure with its own law of motion, its own imperious demands in terms of human life and effort. Our aim is not the abstract one of abolishing the distinction between order givers and order takers, but the political overthrow of the class whose interests lie in the perpetuation of the domination of capital in order that the forces produced by man shall be at his service. For that task, we need not an abandonment of discipline and centralized authority, but its heightening to an unprecedented degree. Our aim is not the abstract one of abolishing the distinction between order givers and order takers, but the political overthrow of the class's interest lie in the perpetuation of the domination of capital, where the forces produced by man shall be at his service. For this task, we need not the abandonment of discipline and centralized authority, but its heightening to an unprecedented degree. Yeah, that makes sense to me, at least.